We asked the candidates their position on that $15 federal minimum wage. Here's what they had to say.
Taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is.
It's particularly a problem in the black community. Only 19.8% of black teenagers have a job. We're looking for one. You know, that's because of those high wages. If you lower those wages, that comes down.
If I thought that raising the minimum wage was the best way to help people increase their pay, I would be all for it, but it isn't. In the 21st century, it's a disaster. If you raise the minimum wage, you're going to make people more expensive than a machine.
Joining me right now, the Wall Street Journal's John Hilsenrath for more on this, and Greg Rayburn, who knows pretty much firsthand the crushing effect that mandating wages can have. As the CEO of Hostess, he tried to cut wages and benefits just to stay in business. The union objected to the whole thing. They went on strike, and what do you know? The company went under. Hostess, the union, because they wanted those higher wages, effectively drove it out of business there. Anyway, good to have both of you guys here on set, or at least you on set with me, Greg. What was your reaction to what we heard there on stage last night regarding minimum wage?
Well, I think it's been very, the responses I heard make sense, right? I mean, very few of the people on that panel or on that dais are going to say, oh yeah, this is a great idea. You know, let's jack up the minimum wage. And you can have all the arguments about the economics of that. Does that displace workers, right? I think Ben Carson made a great point as to who specifically that might. Because
those are entry-level jobs, right? You want to give the kid who's just starting out a shot. And, you know, if you're going to pay him $15 an hour, that job may not exist.
Well, that's the problem I have with it. At the end of the day, every time I hear the Democrats crow about the unemployment rate coming down, I look at our economy and what I see is underemployment. And the underemployment really hits home in the fast food sector. So a lot of this minimum wage debate has been around McDonald's and other QSR, quick serve restaurant type jobs. Those jobs are not career jobs. They were never intended to be career jobs, right? What you have now is that we've pushed people into those jobs who have families to support. That structure doesn't work. That job won't work to support a family, and that's not what it was intended for. So if you raise those,
not of what it was intended for. This is very important. It is, John Hilsenrath, the law of unintended consequences that unfortunately comes into play here. You think you're doing a good thing. You're saying, all right, we're going to raise wages across the board, or we're going to mandate this or that, and suddenly the small business owner that's employing people can't afford to employ them anymore. I mean, and effectively, you wind up with fewer people making money.
Well, so, you know, I think the law of physics applies here. You know, there's no action that isn't met with an equal and opposite reaction. So if the minimum wage goes up, the studies have shown, you know, and I looked very carefully at this study that was done by the Congressional Budget Office that showed if the government raised the federal minimum wage to $10 an hour from a little more than $7, you end up with 500,000 fewer jobs. Now, there would be millions of people who would be making more money with the higher minimum wage, but it would be at the expense of those 500,000 people who all of a sudden have no income at all. And, you know, the other point that I would make here, which is important, is that when you raise the minimum wage, you know, the idea is to help people in poverty. What the CBO study showed is that only 20% of people in poverty would benefit from this. That a third of people who are in higher income families, you know, kids getting their first jobs would benefit it. And, like, is that really what we really want out of a policy like that?
You know, but it comes back to this notion of free stuff, right? And I've been bringing this up over and over again. How do you win an election when the other side is saying, okay, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, we're going to make sure that you make $15 an hour. And as a voter, maybe you're not getting that job might not exist. You're just saying, oh, well, they're going to guarantee me $15 an hour. I mean, Greg, how do the Republicans win in this kind of environment when they're up against things that the other side has given out?
I think last night was actually a good step for these candidates to have a forum where they could really talk about the substantive plans and the differences between those plans that make sense between the candidates, right? The talking about minimum wage and raising minimum wage across the board, across the country, is you're trying to fix a symptom. The symptom is the problem with underemployment, right? The problem with the no growth in the economy. Too many people dependent on government. So the solution to that is who's got an economic plan that is going to lower the corporate tax rate, that's going to incentivize corporations to bring money back home and to invest, right, in job growth. That's the answer. That is ultimately the answer. Frankly, I was a little, I think Jeb Bush can say 4% all he wants. There's got to be something underneath that, right? Mm-hmm. I think the way Republicans win is they detail out, here's how I'm going to drive the economy. Here's how we're going to drive the money to drive jobs.
Well, we did, fortunately, hear
Trish, I think this is
last night.
This is really the important point here is so the real question is, how can you get wages up? I found it interesting that Trump said that wages are too high. I don't think voters want to hear that wages are too high when they've actually been under a lot of downward pressure. But the key ingredient here is economic growth. And that's where I think Republicans ought to be focusing, is spelling out how they're going to generate more economic growth.
Yeah, we need to have more debates like we had last night.
We did.
More of that, seriously. I mean, you need that substantive conversation. Americans, you're right, John, they're hungry for it. Greg, great to have you here. Good to see you again, sir. All right, thank you, John Hilsenrath.